One of the classic theological debates for centuries has been this question of faith versus works. Which one is more important? Which one will lead to salvation? A sort of nebulous faith that we feel and think, or tangible, physical, visible works, which I often equate with acts of service. This debate often ends up to setting up a bit of an argument between James and Paul, with Paul in one corner saying faith is most important, and James in the other corner saying works are more critical. For example, we see in Paul's writings, such as Ephesians 2, 8 through 9, you are saved by God's grace because of your faith. This salvation is God's gift. It's not something you possessed. It's not something you did that you can be proud of. Or Romans 3, 27 and 28. Then what becomes of boasting? It is excluded. Through what kind of law? That of works? No, rather through the law of faith. For we hold that a person is justified by faith apart from works prescribed by the law. And yet I find striking the sentence from James 2:17. Faith is dead when it doesn't result in faithful activity. A faith versus works showdown isn't what's at play here, I don't think. The exact opposite, in fact. The author of James is suggesting that faith is the basis for works. From faith comes works. When one lives with faith and hope and trust and loyalty to God, actions that demonstrate that faith are naturally bound to pour forth. Acts of loyal service are based in a posture of faith. In describing Abraham as a model of faithful service, here in James 2, James writes that his faith was at work along with his actions. In fact, his faith was made complete by his faithful actions. And so we return to the third part of the covenant that we ask new members of this congregation to claim when they join this body of believers. As you unite with the Church of the Brethren, the Elizabethtown Church of the Brethren, will you worship, serve, and share in this congregation's ministries, supporting them by your earnest prayers, regular attendance, loyal service, and faithful stewardship? When I think of loyal service, it immediately brought to mind this idea of works that James is writing about. It seems to me that works or actions are a good synonym for loyal acts of service that bear out faith. In this James text, other translations, like the one in the Bible right in front of you in the pews, uses the word deeds. I think of things like where James started in this passage: clothing the naked, feeding the hungry, volunteering our resources, our time to care for another in ways that help fulfill their human needs. We had an excellent definition of children's time: helping people with the thing they need. And we do it because we are prompted by an understanding that we are all created by God. The spark of the divine is in each one of us, and we have been gifted with skills and opportunities that allow us to serve someone else. I don't necessarily think about the story of Abraham offering his son Isaac on the altar as works or deeds or loyal service. I very much hope that none of us are put to the test in our capacity to support this congregation by our loyal service in the way that Abraham was. It does make me a little nervous that my son's name is Isaac. I don't think about the story of Rahab either when I think of loyal service or works or deeds, which seems even more of a stretch, particularly considering the clarity in the scripture about who Rahab was and what she was doing. Let's hear that story now from Joshua 2 and part of Joshua 6.
Joshua, Nun's son, secretly sent two men as spies from Shittim. He said, "Go, look over the land, especially Jericho." They set out and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab. They bedded down there. Someone told the king of Jericho, "Men from the Israelites have come here tonight to spy on the land." So the king of Jericho sent word to Rahab, "Send out the men who came to you, the ones who came to your house, because they have come to spy on the entire land." But the woman had taken the two men and hidden them. And then she said, "Of course the men came to me, but I don't know where they come from." The men left when it was time to close the gate at dark, but I don't know where the men went. "Hurry, chase after them. You might catch up with them." But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the flax stalks that she had laid out on the roof. The men from Jericho chased after them in the direction of the Jordan up to the fords. As soon as those chasing them went out, the gate was shut behind them. Before the spies bedded down, Rahab went up to them on the roof. She said to them, "I know that the Lord has given you the land. Terror over you has overwhelmed us. The entire population of the land has melted down in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Reed Sea in front of you when you left Egypt. We have also heard what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites on the other side of the Jordan. You utterly wiped them out. We heard this, and our hearts turned to water. Because of you, people can no longer work up their courage. This is because the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. Now I have been loyal to you. So pledge to me by the Lord that you in turn will deal loyally with my family. Give me a sign of good faith. Spare the lives of my father, mother, brothers, and sisters, along with everything they own. Rescue us from death." The men said to her, "We swear by our own lives to secure yours. If you don't reveal our mission, we will deal loyally and faithfully with you when the Lord gives us the land." So she lowered the spies on a rope through the window. Her house was on the other side of the city wall, and she lived inside the wall. Then she said to them, "Go toward the highlands so that those chasing you don't run into you. Hide there for 3 days until those chasing you return. Then you may go on your way." The spies went out and entered the highlands. They stayed there for 3 days until those chasing them came back. Those chasing them had searched all along the road, but never found them. Then the two men came back down from the highlands. They crossed the Jordan and came to Joshua, Nun's son. They told him everything that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, "The Lord has definitely given us the entire land into our power. In addition, all the land's population has melted down in fear because of us." Joshua spoke to the two men who had scouted out the land. "Go to the prostitute's house. Bring out the woman from there along with everyone related to her, exactly as you pledged to her." So the young men who had been spies went and brought Rahab out along with her father, her mother, her brothers, and everyone related to her. They brought her whole clan out and let them stay outside Israel's camp. Joshua let Rahab the prostitute live, her family and everyone related to her. So her family still lives among Israel today because she hid the spies whom Joshua had sent to scout out Jericho.
I'm going to try to keep this PG, but you should know that this text is sort of rated R. I titled this sermon Loyal Service, but if I were to rename it, it would probably be something more provocative than that. Maybe prostitution. Or maybe loyal service is somewhat provocative. Perhaps this Joshua text is only PG-13. It's actually difficult to know because we aren't given specifics. But to suffice it to say that in the first verse of Joshua 2 alone, there are at least 3 references that will alert an attentive ancient listener to the tension that is present. Joshua, Nun's son, secretly sent 2 men as spies from Shittim. He said, "Go, look over the land, especially Jericho." They set out and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab. They bedded down there. The reference to Shittim is the first thing to notice. In Numbers 25, we find that when the Israelites were living in Shittim, the Israelite men were intimate with the women of Moab. Israelite people began to interact in new ways with foreigners, outsiders. And unfortunately, as they got close, the Moabite women invited the men to sacrifices for their God. And the Israelites ate a meal and worshiped this other god. And that didn't go well for Israel. The Lord was pretty mad and actually instructed Moses to take all those men who had put their loyalty elsewhere and kill them in broad daylight. That's another sermon. But this first verse of Joshua 2 starts there with the spies from Shittim. And then we have Rahab's description as prostitute. Rahab's vulnerable and questionable and provocative social position is an obvious tension. Her identity as prostitute brings into question her character, ethics, and choices, and the character, ethics, and choices of those who associate with her. There's also some innuendo present in the statements that the spies sent by Joshua entered the house and spent the night in the New Revised Standard Version, or bedded down, as it's translated in the CEB version that we heard from Liz. And there is more, but I won't go into all of it. There is innuendo all over these verses. Rahab is not set up well. One commenter writes, Rahab symbolized everything that was opposite to Israel's best religious self. And yet, Rahab's actions demonstrate that her loyalty lies with God. I don't think prostitution in the sense of physical intimacy is the only type of prostitution that is being insinuated. The text harkens back to prostituting as it was referenced in Deuteronomy 31. The Lord was giving sort of final instructions to Moses and Joshua. Moses is going to die, and Joshua is being entrusted with the next phase of the journey. And God says to Moses, "Soon you will lie down with your ancestors. Then this people will begin to prostitute themselves to the foreign gods in their midst, the gods of the land into which they are going. They will forsake me, breaking my covenant that I have made with them." Loyalty is questioned. Faithfulness is out the window. Trust is broken. And that's really the heart of prostitution, isn't it? relating to or connecting intimately with something or someone in a way that harms or severs an established value or relationship or promise or covenant. Giving up something valued in oneself to gain something that seems important in the moment or on the surface. Losing direction or focus on what is really important because of temptations and tugs that are in the immediate present. In this case, in Deuteronomy 31, the prediction is that the people will get lost without Moses as their leader, and they will pursue a relationship with foreign gods, which will lead to a broken covenant between God and the people, as we also saw in the story of Shittim. The choice is one of loyalty. And loyalty is at play in the story we hear of Rahab in several ways. The text immediately before this story of Rahab in Joshua 1 shows the tribes declaring their loyalty to Joshua and critiquing any who go against Joshua's orders. In Joshua 2, the unnamed king of Jericho presumes loyalty from Rahab when he demands that she bring the men out of her house. Rahab uses her loyalty to the spies to secure their loyalty to her. And with yet another nod to Epiphany, Rahab instructs the spies to return by another way. And I think Rahab herself navigates another way of loyal service born out of faith. To whom or to what do we pledge ourselves by our actions? To whom or what do we serve? I have a membership in the Peace and Justice Studies Association. And on Thursday, I received an email that was sent out to the PJSA group from a colleague who was sharing the news of a fundraiser from the Fellowship of Reconciliation. The FOR is trying to raise money to put an ad in the media in Israel supporting 18-year-old Israeli-American Tal Mitnick. This week, Tal was sentenced to a second 30-day prison term. His crime? He is refusing conscription into Israel's military. Quote, "I do not want to take part in the continuation of the oppression and the continuation of the cycle of bloodshed, but to work directly for a solution," he said. Tal is the first of 200 Israeli high schoolers who, in August, signed a joint letter pledging to conscientiously object when they graduate and are ordered to report for military service. It's not an easy choice. Refuseniks, the Israeli term for conscientious objectors, are maligned in Israel's society, accused of being traitors and cowards. The ostracization they experience includes difficulty finding employment. Yet Tal is today in the midst of his second 30-day sentence, and more jail time will follow. In his words, Tal Mitnick's words, from December 25th of this past year, after the terrorist attack, a revenge campaign began not only against Hamas, but against all Palestinian people. Indiscriminate bombings against residential neighborhoods and refugee camps in Gaza, full military and political support for settler violence in the West Bank, and political prosecution on an unprecedented scale inside Israel. The reality we live in is a violent one. According to Hamas, and also according to the IDF and the political echelon, violence is the only way. Continuing this cycle, an eye for an eye, without thinking about an actual solution that would provide security and freedom to us all, only leads to more killing and suffering. I refuse to believe that more violence will bring security. I refuse to take part in a war of revenge." End quote. I suspect this story resonates with many of us, as this example of loyal servants is at the root of our peace church tradition. And the act of conscientious objection is one that is familiar to many, and in fact, a choice that some people in this room have made. God calls us to service in many ways. We serve our families. We serve our communities through various good local organizations. We serve in our jobs at work. Many of us have served in the larger church through our denominational annual conference offices, volunteering through disaster relief ministries, youth service work camps, Brethren Volunteer Service or BVS, as well as ecumenical and interfaith work and connections. We serve through the ministries of this particular congregation, and you now have the opportunity to serve in a very special way as we prepare to welcome a refugee family in less than 2 weeks. So while this story of Rahab, like the story of Abraham, may not be what I typically think of as an act of service, in and through Rahab's works, faith in God is visible. She has heard the stories of this one true God, and she recognizes that this is her path to life. What loyalty will we make a priority? In what service can we engage? How will we find life for ourselves and for this community of Jesus followers through our loyal service? I would suggest that our commitment to this congregation, visible through this loyal service to one another, to our community of faith and the wider global Christian church, is found ultimately in our loyalty to the sacred Creator, the holy light and love that guides life and being. May we find that path. May it be so.